So we could have probably done that basement for like 65,000 to add in a legal basement apartment.
Yeah.
I don't know if that particular property was a good investment.
In terms of like tenants, or in terms of like just like stuff in the property breaking down?
Either unit, because they were both demoed, both under renovation, took us a year and 3 months to finish.
So no rent for a year and 3 months. Are you a first-time home buyer or investor thinking about getting into today's market? Are you curious about ugly properties versus quality properties? Then this podcast is for you. Hey everybody, my name is Ryan with the Dunn Real Estate Group, and this is Koken with Mortgages by Koken. And today we're going to discuss some of our past experiences about buying ugly or quality properties and how that can relate to you in today's market. I hope you enjoy. All right, Koken. So today we are going to be talking about ugly versus quality. Couple different ways, probably talk about investors as well as kind of like that first-time home buyer. But I think you have a pretty good story about kind of early on in your investing career and about kind of when you had the option to kind of choose ugly versus quality kind of thing. Want to maybe talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, it's this was back in 2017. I was buying a property with some joint venture partners as an investment. So we're going to buy this property together, renovate it, and keep it as a rental property. I clearly remembered the day we bought the property that I bought. We saw, 4 homes, and the 2 that come to mind are the one we bought. So it was a, 1940s, 50s built duplex. I would call it an ugly property. We were going to renovate it anyways, but the bones and just a lot about the property was just, it wasn't a super high quality property by any means.
You can renovate it, but it's only ever getting so much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And we ended up buying that for $272,000.
People are going to get angry when they hear that.
But that same day, the other property that we saw was probably one of the nicest renovated 1,000 square foot bungalows in the north end of St. Catharines.
Oh.
And like beautiful kitchen. The upper level, you wouldn't touch a thing. You'd add laundry to make it a duplex. The basement was finished, kind of had like tile floors, so you'd still have to, add in a kitchen, bathroom, make it into a second unit. Big backyard. Right now, with all the changes, you could probably make a third or fourth unit in that like lot size, and quiet street north end. That was for $400,000.
So $130,000.
So not nothing, right?
Not nothing to sniff at, particularly when you're talking about the percentage of the purchase price too.
Yeah, almost like 50% higher, right? The kicker was that that property at that time, renovation prices were a little bit cheaper. It was just starting to boom. So we could have probably done that basement for like 65,000 to add in a legal basement apartment. Around that time, that was the going prices.
Yeah.
We ended up spending 120,000 on the property we bought.
Oh.
Right. So now our all-in cost was close to 400.
Yeah.
And then the all-in cost on that property would have been maybe, 460, 470,
yeah,
right?
okay.
And like even worse, the property we bought was a existing duplex, but not legal. And somehow to go through the process, the city of St. Catharines gave us such a hard time. We couldn't rent either unit because they were both demoed, both under renovation. Took us a year and 3 months to finish.
So no rent for a year and 3 months.
No rent, right? The other property, the upstairs was beautiful. We would have rented it out. We would have covered most of our costs while we were waiting. And it was still going to cash flow north of like 500. And I think we calculated it was going to be 700 or 800 on this duplex because the rents on that property would have been more, right? So even though cash flow is less, like overall the numbers were, yes, this one had more cash flow on paper, but it wasn't, they were both in the positive territory.
Yeah.
And now obviously time has passed like 5 years, right? I ended up exiting that investment. So my partners bought me out.
Yep.
We came up with a fair value, I think, something like the 5 to 525 range. I forget exactly what price. So they bought out my portion. They still continue to hold it. It's a solid property. It's been renovated. So there's not much to do with that property. But I just think back, that 400,000 property, we put 60 grand into it. Even after prices have come down, that's got to be at least in the high 6s, maybe the 7s, right? In a nice area of St. Catharines, and just the quality of tenants we would have attracted along the way, it has really shaped how I view investments now, right? Like whether it's, real estate, even like businesses or anything I look at, I'm like, I start with the quality and then look at, is the price I pay a reasonable price for what I'm getting versus what's the bottom dollar, what's the cheapest to start with, and then thinking, is it a good investment or not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really interesting point. Like whether you look at where you start that thing, right? Some people will just start at price and then try and justify a good investment, and you'll only ever get to a certain point because you'll only ever get so high before you find something that works, right? Whereas if you kind of start at quality and then try and, kind of find your good investment from there, you're likely going to end up with a much higher quality product in the end of the day. And I mean, I think there are some pros and cons to that. I mean, obviously, I think that property worked out pretty well for you. It's not like it worked out poorly.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it still was a good investment, but it was more that just the market went up.
Yeah.
I don't know if that particular property was a good investment. The pain it caused me and my partners, just the hassles we went through.
In terms of like tenants, or in terms of like just like stuff in the property breaking down, or
getting the renovation done took taking forever.
Okay.
Right. Just the quality of the property led to us doing structural fixes when we opened up walls, and it's good it's done.
Yeah.
But I would rather have not done that. Right.
For sure.
Even like just losing out on rent for a year and 3 months. Like again, it's an extreme case, but clearly the other property would have had a better sort of situation. When I look back over the last 5 years, we've had a decent amount of turnover. Like these are small rental units in this duplex.
Like
and
they're 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom?
Yeah, both are 2 bedrooms, but one of the 2 bedrooms is like a 500 square foot 2 bedroom.
It's tight.
It is tiny, right? So it's fully renovated. So we get decent rents.
Yep.
Right. But it's still a property that has a fair bit of turnover. So I think, if you really look at our all-in costs after the filling costs each time it's vacant, right? How much better off were we going that route than the nicer property? And like, I can confidently say if we bought the nicer property, I would still own it. I would not ask my partners to buy me out.
Yeah.
Right. That would be a property I'd want to keep as long as we were able to keep it. Versus this property, I didn't think it was worth the hassle to stay involved.
I think that brings us to, I think, a really good point about when you're considering, ugly versus quality, or even maybe just a little bit lower class than quality kind of thing. But we'll just kind of keep with that frame for this topic here. But the time frame that you're planning on keeping something, I think, is a very important thing to consider when you're dealing with this, right? Like, so in your case, for instance, you, in the long run, I mean, I don't know what you did with the money that you bought. Maybe, you bought NVIDIA for a really cheap price and you're doing great right now. But generally speaking, you probably lost out because you didn't have the staying power because of the property. The poor class property reduced your staying power because it increased the headaches. Is that a fair thing for me to say?
Yeah.
And so because you did that, you're going to lose out on kind of a lot of quote unquote easy money over time, right? Where that like North End property, you probably have very limited tenant turnover. You're just letting it keep chugging along. And then, maybe 3, 4, 5, 10 years from now, you probably would have done really, really well on that, right? It may have increased.
Well, I think about even those partners. Maybe if it went smoother, we may have bought a third property together. So this was our second property.
You're right.
So anyways, who knows? But that's definitely a point about the time horizon and your ability to stick with it.
For sure.
How many stories have we heard of people who buy in the rough parts of, St. Catharines, and any sort of rough part of town where the numbers look great, and they don't actually get those great numbers because they have tenants who don't pay, vacancies that last a longer time, hard time finding a good replacement, right? So like actually receiving the pro forma matters. It doesn't matter if you can paint a good picture on paper, right?
Well, and that's like, I think maybe not on this channel, but we've talked before about your repairs and maintenance budget, right? So you get like a brand new property. Repairs and maintenance is supposed to be a percentage of rents. But if you have super high rents, you probably won't need all the repairs and maintenance. When you have super low rents, that's when you're going to need a huge budget for repairs and maintenance.
Low rents and an older property.
Yeah, that's your kind of your ugly property, right? Now, I think on the reverse side of that, if for whatever reason you have a much shorter time horizon, and the one property does give you a substantial bit more every month, and depending on where the market is, like say in this current market, I don't know exactly why you'd want to do this, but say in this current market, your duration is 2 to 3 years. Okay, so market's probably not jumping up in those 2 to 3 years. So a super high class property that's not giving us very much money
Yeah.
every month may not be the play in that period of time. If you
Sure.
can get a good deal on maybe a bit of a lower class property,
Yeah.
you know your duration's short,
Yeah.
probably not going to go lose mutts, and you know you don't have to deal with that long termness of tenants always kind of turning over and stuff like that.
And that's a very good point, right? Like there is a case to be made that at the peak when prices were the highest in 2021, you would have been a bit better served buying the cheap property in the rundown area versus really paying those premium valuations of the premium properties at that time, just because those properties went up the most as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I remember you helped quite a few clients during that time buy, you know, the duplexes, the triplexes that still cash flow despite the elevated prices. And I'm sure some of those clients are thankful they bought those instead of the, you know, absolutely like expensively priced, you know, premium properties at that time.
And similar to like you know we were pretty much preaching like B+ class properties.
Yes.
Like that was kind of where I saw the value, where we were kind of directing a lot of our clients. And I think you look at that compared to say those like A or AA class properties, maybe a purpose built duplex or something like that. Those are probably a bit harder to hold right now.
Sure.
And then similarly on the opposite end, you know, those lower class properties that, you know, maybe we're bringing in good cash flow during then and it didn't really matter. They may be a little bit harder to hold right now because you had the tenant turnover. You're having to deal with maybe more tenants who aren't able to pay because they're being hit a little bit harder by, you know, what's going on in the economy.
Yeah.
And so, those people who have stable cash flow and a pretty decent class property are probably still plugging along and everything's doing okay. But I think on that point, it's a little bit interesting to consider this from like the first time home buyer perspective as well.
Sure.
Right? Because, you know, I was just recently dealing with a client, and fortunately for them, they had a pretty big range of their budget. So they could afford a lot more than a starter home, but they were considering just putting a lot more down on a starter home and then just having a very low mortgage, paying it off quickly and kind of like jumping up, or do they kind of get maybe a house that they can grow into a little bit more, right? I mean, their spread was probably big, but a lot of people have that spread. Okay. You know, maybe it's 500 to 550 or 450 to 500. $50,000 in that price range makes a huge difference of what kind of property you're going to get, right? It's just oftentimes people have that, I don't want to be house poor. I don't want to be at the top of my budget. So I'm pre-approved for 525, but let's not look above 475. That's a conversation that I have all the time with first-time home buyers. And I'm sure, you know, you with mortgages, you're dealing with clients and talking about how much can we stretch ourselves and everything like that, right? And so in that case, we're talking about somebody that's a home that you're going to be living in. And we're also probably talking about something that you're going to be in for maybe a little bit of time. Maybe you're initially thinking that, I'm only going to be in here for 2 to 3, 4 years because then I'm going to have kids and move on. But life changes and you don't really know. I think, do you have any thoughts kind of for like, obviously you've bought places, you've lived in them. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that side of things for the first time home buyer and how it may differ from maybe the investor?
Yeah, it's, there's a few thoughts. Like one is same as with the investor, buying a little bit of a higher quality home. But in this case, I would make quality more like a nicer home that you can stay in a little bit longer. Maybe it has that extra bedroom. Maybe it has that extra space in the basement. Or the one sort of niche I love is if it has a basement apartment at a higher price. You can rent it out to cover your costs in the beginning, but then you can use that basement later as part of your home down the road.
For sure.
Right? Because now you get to like double your living space if it's a bungalow, or 50% higher if it's a 2-story, without having to move, right? You just maybe have a wall that you take down and then you have access to your basement again. That's what my wife and I did actually. So we had a bachelor apartment, rented it out for the first 2 years. And then afterwards we decided, you know what, we were at a place we were ready to pay more to live in the place we lived. And we wanted to have that extra space and have that privacy. And we didn't have to move, and we got 50% more space in our home.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, all else being equal, like moving costs a good bit of money. There's land transfer tax, there's your actual moving costs, lawyer fees, everything like that. So generally you're going to save if you kind of stay in your home. Obviously there's certain circumstances and
it's
everything
disruptive,
like that,
right?
Very much so.
Once you're like, I realized, so I used to live in St. Catharines, we moved to Welland, and it's not that far away, but then you have to
20 minutes.
Find a new doctor, I actually still use the doctor in St. Catharines. So I drive 30 minutes just because it's such a hassle for me to figure it out. But dentists and schools, there's a lot of things that go into moving that if you can set yourself up with a purchase that can last a little bit longer and gives you some options, I think it's worth paying up, but obviously everyone has their own financial circumstance. So you have to figure out, like, do you have that bandwidth to pay up a little bit more without it really squeezing you? Because obviously financial stress is like real.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
So,
100%. And I think that's, there's a difference between, not going on one instead of two vacations,
Yeah.
and not going on any, and, going and eating ramen because your mortgage payment is so high. Right.
Yeah.
Or every day, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like,
100%.
right. And so I think, within that realm, obviously it has to be reasonable for you to do, but I completely agree. Like, I know when we bought our first house, we were looking, I think initially, under 300.
Okay.
Yeah, so back good times. We were looking under 300,
Okay.
and we were just kind of find something that was a little bit run down that we could kind of fix up, make some equity in, and then sell it, move on, rent it out, and move on, or whatever that is. Long story short, we ended up kind of stumbling on like a brick bungalow that was like 325, or it was listed for a little bit higher, but whatever. We thought we could get it for 325.
All right.
And it was like, okay, can we do this? We called some family members to kind of help boost our purchasing power, and we ended up buying it. And it was probably like, I look back on that decision now, like, we were really nervous about it. Do we want to do this? Do we want to, have to pay somebody else back? All this kind of other stuff. And it was by far the best thing that we ever did. We still own that property today. It's in a nice neighborhood. We 100% could have lived there, except that we wanted to keep buying and kind of move up. Whereas like if we were looking at those properties that were 275 or 280, we probably wouldn't even own the property now. We probably would have sold it, moved into something pretty similar to what we ended up buying there. And again, like from a financial perspective, probably would have actually lost out on in terms of, where we would be today versus not, right? I know a lot of clients like that. Obviously you have to be able to afford it initially, but for a first time home buyer, sometimes it goes from shiny, not quality, shiny, to like quality, but dull, right? Think about, getting the renovated wartime home.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's, your 900 square foot bungalow. It's got a basement. It's in a wartime neighborhood. It's built in, early 50s, late 40s or something like that. And, you're probably the nicest house in the neighborhood. Might be 400,000, let's call it, or whatever. Right. But it's shiny. Everything looks new. Maybe you bring your wife through. She loves the kitchen because it's got all brand new appliances. You guys are all like vibing on this thing. And then you go, down the street or a few streets over, and you've got like a rundown brick bungalow. It's totally a quality house. It's maybe even a little bit newer. So like the bones of it have better quality construction. It was built during building code, but it looks like your grandma's house. Doesn't excite you. You don't have the stainless steel appliances, and maybe you got to pay an extra $25,000 or $30,000 more. But you can afford that 25 or 30, and you're sitting there like, well, do we really want to spend extra money to get something that doesn't look as nice? And we're going to want to change this, and we're going to end up spending all this extra money. And that's a real conversation that happens all the time. Obviously, each person's different, and you got to know what you can live in. But my fiance and I, we've always bought in the dull quality house. We maybe lived in it a little bit dull for a while, fixed it up over time. Paint goes a long way, even with cabinets, little things, light fixtures, right? That aren't super expensive that, you can do in a weekend. You will from experience, we did way better buying homes like that than going and getting the shiny, maybe a little bit less quality.
Well, if you think about what does quality even mean, and what you described are the things in a home that you can't change. So you can't change its location.
Nope.
More or less, you can't change its bones, the structure, the square footage, ceiling heights, like those are pretty much set. The renovations you can always change. Now, maybe you don't want to do that, that's fine. But you have to realize the wartime bungalow, as soon as you buy it, you live in it, those renovations are depreciating. It's getting lived in, it's getting used. Like our home was renovated before we moved in. The floors are starting to come apart. Like it's losing its value. Not the house, the renovation.
The renovations, yep,
right?
For sure.
Versus the bones of the property, the location. You get a home in a good location, a solid square footage. Those things stay and if not increase in value over time. Right? And maybe you do a renovation so that if you're leaving and you sell the place, the next guy's going to pay up for a renovated home in a nice area, right? You can then get a good lift that way versus if you get the nice home like you described on the maybe not so nice street and 5-10 years later, it's been lived in. Now, if you ever want to move, you may have to renovate it again to bring it up to a standard to get that good sale price, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, obviously everything's different, case by case and different for everyone. But by and large, I think it is important to kind of have those conversations. Whether you are an investor and you're talking with your investment partner, it's like, hey, do we want to sacrifice $500 a month in cash flow to get a little bit better property? At $500 a month in cash flow, like that's all like you and I've talked about before, like it's not like you're going to go live off that $500, but it does make that bank account look a little bit nicer when you do have to go do the inevitable repair, right? But we go over here to this property where maybe we're making it's still cash flow positive. Again, we're not going from plus 300 to minus 200. Month over month might not look as nice, but in 10 years, 5 years, you're probably way happier with that nicer property.
And I think for the people watching this, they need to realize we are not the fancy type of people who drive around in luxury cars and live in palaces.
I drive an Outback. You drive a minivan.
Exactly. Like we love to save money on stuff. Yet we're saying don't cheap out on this one area because it may hurt you in the long run.
For sure. I think there's a difference between being, I'm going to say frugal and cheap.
Sure.
But maybe that frugal is not exactly the right word. But there is a difference between those two, right? Like I'm pretty frugal. You're pretty frugal.
Sure.
Right? But I don't think either of us are cheap. Right? We're going to look for quality in what we're buying. We're not going to look for luxury, but we're going to look for quality in what we're buying. And right? And whether that's, the shoes that I'm wearing, the house that I'm living in, or like an assistant that I'm hiring, I want to look for quality and I'm willing to pay up for quality. I don't need luxury, but quality, in my opinion, is going to serve you way better in the long term. If I only need a pair of shoes for 1 week, I can buy the cheapest pair of shoes. It doesn't matter because in 1 week I'm throwing them out anyways. But if I'm going to wear the shoes for, I don't know, I've got shoes that I've got for 10 years. I take care of them. They're nice leather and they serve me way better than buying a pair that was 50% less. I'm going to throw away in a year.
Yeah, I got upset that I had to throw away a pair of jeans after like 2 or 3 years. I was like, the previous jeans I had, I kept from like high school. They lasted like over 10 years. Like, why did these jeans fail after 2 years? Like,
and I mean, I think we see that all the time, right? And we see it all the time in our clients trying to buy homes, but I think everybody sees it all the time just out in the world, right? Sometimes people get that really low price tag and you get a little bit excited because you think you're saving going to go buy that lower quality product. And then that product breaks. And the one that was 25% more would have lasted 100% longer. Where did you really save money?
100%.
Right?
I mean, my hero and idol, Charlie Munger, says this in the best way, right? It's like, it's better to buy a great business at a fair price than a good business or a mediocre business at a cheap price. And it really translates into real estate, right? Like you still want a deal, right? You still want to get the best deal you can on that quality home.
Don't overpay for something. Like that's not what we're suggesting here at all, right?
But that will serve you. Like it doesn't seem obvious, but that is a lot better of a deal than the mediocre home at a cheap price. And it's hard to like grasp that sometimes because you just look at the number and you sort of fixate on a number. You just think you're getting a good deal because it's a cheap price. But like we've had this conversation before, right? Like some of the cheapest homes are the worst properties. Like it doesn't mean it's a good deal because the number is low. It matters what you get for that number, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many times where it just becomes a money pit. Right? You get something that's like, oh my gosh, I bought the cheapest duplex in all of Niagara. Okay, great. How much money is that actually making you? Right? I'm not saying to go buy the most expensive because that's probably not making you anything either. But somewhere in the middle there is probably kind of your sweet spot, right? I think just one other thing to mention on that is you can also look for great deals on quality, right?
I would say some of the best deals are what you described, which is like a quality home on a quality street that just doesn't look shiny.
Like if you're a first time home buyer and you can afford a quality home on a quality street, go find the one with yellow paint and purple walls. Because I guarantee you'll get it for way less than the cost to paint that. Like the difference between the one that's been freshly painted versus the one that has ugly wallpaper and purple will be way more than $10,000. and you could hire a painter to do it for probably $2,500.
Yeah.
And so you just made money there because you were able to see a little bit past that, right? I mean, that's the first thing I tell, when we sell homes and, you deal with an estate sale.
Yeah.
Some people will just say, like, I've got a listing that's coming up right now where they had the first person come through. It's like an old brick bungalow, good neighborhood in St. Catharines. And it's like carpet throughout, pink, red walls, wallpaper everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Like, just lighting that you feel like you're in the 1800s, like it's a candle lit. And the first person that came in there said, don't do anything. We're going to sell this because the location's going to sell everything. Whoever's going to come in here is going to renovate this anyways. I came in there and I was like, listen, I can sell the house whatever you guys want to do, but I think that it's in your best interest if we rip out this carpet, because I knew there was hardwood under it. Rip out this carpet, rip off all this wallpaper, and pay for somebody to paint it. I'm like, might cost you guys $3,000 to $5,000 in labor. Guarantee you're going to get more than $10,000 back. They ended up ripping up the carpet. Turns out the hardwood was actually in terrible shape. They thought it wasn't. It turns out it was. Yeah. They paid to get it refinished.
Okay.
They painted the place.
Okay.
The place looks amazing.
Yeah.
Now somebody in that same house, like now that first-time home buyer that we're talking about, or somebody who wants to live in that neighborhood, they feel like they can move in right into that home and not have to do anything.
Yeah.
They feel like they can just move right in. Everything will be fine. And, now your buyer pool is so much bigger. Yeah. And even the person who's going to renovate it feels like they don't need to they'll probably pay a little bit more for it, even though they were going to rip out the kitchen and repaint anyways. Yeah. Now when they walk in, it just doesn't feel as grimy. It doesn't feel as low lit. Yeah. So they're going to pay a lot more for it, right? So if you're a buyer and you're coming into this market and you can kind of find that lazy seller or whatever it is, maybe there's genuine reasons. Sure. People are out of town, they can't do it. Totally understand. Yeah. But you go find that lazy seller, quote unquote, who didn't do that.
Yeah. That's the opportunity.
Because those homes in this market in particularly, they have to sell. Yeah. Because they're not selling that for fun. Yeah. It's not like,
and not a whole lot of flippers are out there buying up these homes to flip them. So if you are willing to look past that, do a bit of work, you can get a pretty good deal right now.
I completely agree. Yeah. Like flippers, the good ones are buying a lot right now because they know that they can get good deals. Yeah. Whereas but
even they are becoming pickier. They want more of a margin of safety with their purchases too, right?
100%. So if you just go like a little bit above their crazy margin, because all the guys that were buying at these, like all the people who, for instance, in 2022 and 2021, this strategy really didn't work because you had somebody going in there that was investing and they were just going to blow you out of the water because they knew they didn't care. They just wanted to get any property that was there. I need a property in a good neighborhood. I'm going to find a way to do this. Yeah. All those people who were buying at the increased margin are now gone. They're washed out. They're just trying to, do anything to pay their bills. Yeah. And people deep value investors are still there buying up the crazy good ones. Yeah. And then, I'm sorry.
Just someone comes to mind.
They're still working, right? Yeah. They're still doing what they have to do. But all those people that were kind of just skimming the surface, making money based on market lift, they're almost exclusively gone. Yeah. Right. So now you can come in as a regular buyer, first-time home buyer, end user. You can get a way better deal on a property that's not painted. Yeah. Just because it's purple or pink or whatever it is, or there's a disgusting carpet that you and I can go rip up in 2 hours on a weekend. Right. So it's an interesting kind of section of the market right now. If you are a first-time home buyer, somebody like that, there's, I think, a lot of opportunity. Again, if you're willing to do that. I understand that it doesn't fit into everybody's life. You're two people who commute to Toronto every day, like you can't do that. It's just not working for you. But if you do have a little bit of time and you can sacrifice a little bit of short-term discomfort, I think it will pay you many, many dividends in the long run. And I think sacrificing some short-term discomfort in the investor, buying, ugly versus quality as well, will I think pay you dividends in the long run as well.
I think that's a good segue for right now we're filming this in the fall of 2024. Yeah. We've already had our first 2 interest rate cuts, or has it just been 1?
No, definitely 2.
2, right? Yes, 2. So we've had 2 more coming up. Like they're expecting 1 to 3 more cuts is what all the different banks are saying. So in this environment, how are you seeing the pricing of those type of homes? We already talked a little bit about it, but what's the ugly property from the investment standpoint versus the premium ones? How are those priced right now in terms of the demand? And then for the first time buyer looking at the sort of quality home that needs work versus the shiny home, like what do those properties look like right now and what's the demand on them?
For sure, for sure. So I think kind of a slightly contrary to a lot of what we've said here is that from the investment property standpoint, there are some ugly properties with desperate sellers that cannot sell them.
Yeah.
If you can pick one of those up for a steal, like an actual steal, which they are out there,
Yeah.
because nobody's buying them, not a bad opportunity.
Yeah.
That being said, if you can pick up a steal for a great property, because also very few, not nobody, but very few people are buying quality rentals, then that's obviously a better option. But I would say like right now, quality rentals priced well will sell. Ugly rentals almost won't sell at any price.
Wow.
So like you can get, I mean, you get real bare bottom where you can pick up that steal.
Yeah.
It'll move, but if you can get that opportunity, that's almost not a bad option there as well.
But imagine being the seller of that property. They bought the ugly property and now they're forced to sell and no one wants to buy their property.
Well, that's the thing, right? Again, that's when it comes down to this, what we were talking about earlier in terms of time frame duration.
Yeah.
Whereas like you can get an absolute steal on an ugly property right now. When the market goes up, you'll be able to sell it.
Sure.
As long as you know that you can hold it till the market goes up. Because when the market was up, those things were still flying off the shelves.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you can get everything baked into your purchase price, which is 100% possible right now, then it might not be the worst thing.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you have to sell in a market like this, you really want to have that good property because it's actually saleable. Like there are some properties that I'm looking at on the MLS right now that are like almost $1,000 a month cash flow.
Oh, wow.
And they can't sell. They're not selling. They've been sitting for months and months and months.
Interesting. And that's $1,000 a month of cash flow with high interest rates that we're literally expecting to go down in the next couple of months.
It's going to continue to get better. But they're ugly properties, not in great locations, and you can't give them away. Like if anything in 2021, 2022, 2020 with $1,000 cash flow, you'd have bids on bids on bids. It
was crazy.
Yeah.
Right? It was crazy.
So on that side of things, I think the investment side, there's a little bit more to play with. I think on the end user side, like kind of that first time home buyer stuff, I mean, I don't see as many of those screaming steals that we could talk about on the ugly property. I feel that your ugly property and your, more value quality property are discounted at fairly similar rates just because there's enough first time home buyers or people who's, say your limit's 500, my limit's 400.
It's a fairly active.
Yeah, there's still buyers at the under 400 and there's still buyers at the under 500. Both are kind of active enough. So you're not getting a bigger deal on one or the other. So if you can afford to get a little more quality, it's probably worth it.
Well, one way to get a quality property at potentially a cheaper price is looking at tenant occupied properties, right?
Great opportunity there.
Yeah.
I would say that I got tenant occupied properties right now. Tenant occupied medium to low class properties are just, I don't think any have sold. Like in like 6, I don't know, like go on Niagara, look at multifamilies in the last 6 months. I don't think you'll see any tenant occupied that are ugly properties that have sold. I don't
and
think
especially if you are going to move in, it's within your rights to ask for one unit to be vacant. Right? You can clean it up, paint it, do whatever you want to it, but not another investor can't do that.
I mean, you're talking now like to the, people like you and I, the big value guys, the people that will live with some, discomfort to kind of get our future a little bit better. I'm going to say vast majority of people watching are not going to want to go move into a triplex and take over,
But even like a duplex, right? Like a nice duplex that has like, say, a basement apartment and it's just tenanted right now and maybe it's not selling. Maybe the tenants make it a mess and it's hard for
or maybe they're not paying full market.
Exactly.
Right? Where the basement's paying market and the main floor is not like they're paying reasonable. They're going to be able to go find another place. But they're not paying $2,000 a month. Right? You can move in there. You're going to be able to get
you get some rent from the basement to help you qualify for a higher purchase price.
No, I think there's for people looking to like if you're willing to rough it maybe a little bit, like I think you can and you're a first time home buyer and you're looking to do something like that, you could pay yourself dividends in the future if you're willing to do that.
And I think knowing both of our stories, that's kind of what we both did, right? Like,
We got super lucky in terms, well, me personally, I got super lucky in terms of timing.
so timing was on our side, but we still did that. We were willing to rough it out, right? I was living in
Yeah.
1 bedroom of a 6-bedroom student rental that I bought with my brother, and we had like 4 other tenants.
And then you moved to luxury.
Oh man.
Then you moved to moving in a fourplex.
Yeah, I moved into a 1 unit of a fourplex. Prior to that, I rented a home in downtown St. Catharines that was broken into twice while I lived there. So
Lots of luxury there.
lots of luxury. Oh man.
But I mean, I think you'd probably like, did not going through those things, living, fairly cheaply, buying more real estate, did not set you up to be in a pretty decent spot?
100%. If I think like going more to like life advice, what I look back at what has worked is always just live one stage below your means or income, right?
Yeah.
So like if you make 40 grand a year, or say you make 60 grand a year, but can live like the guy who's making 40 grand a year, and then if you can get up to 80 grand, live like the guy who's making 60 grand. Just like stay one stage behind. You don't have to go to like 0, but just one stage behind. You have a little bit more in the bank. You get to save a bit more. You take a little bit more discomfort. Like these things are temporary, right? The first home you buy, you live in it for a couple of years, maybe 5 years, but like eventually maybe you make more income. You can always upgrade, and there's always further stages. So I think roughing it out, in my opinion, is the best, but obviously not everyone's going to accept that.
Not everyone's going to accept that. And I mean, there's obviously like, you didn't have your child until you were in your own home.
Yeah, that probably changes things.
That similarly for me, I had a very understanding girlfriend, but I had no children in her life and things like that. So obviously there's a caveat for people that are in those situations.
So you can only optimize for a few things in life. Like you can optimize to make the most money, make the best financial decision, or you can optimize to make the best quality of life. And so ideally you want to optimize the finances first for a couple of years so that you get to switch over later.
Well, think about like hypothetical scenario. Instead of going and moving in to that, 1 bedroom of the student rental and then going and, living in downtown St. Catharines and then a fourplex. If you would have just, as soon as you could have, bought your condo, maybe, because that's probably what it would have been or something like that. Maybe your first apartment or whatever it is. Yeah. And if that's what you bought and you kind of stress yourself, or maybe you rented a nice place so you couldn't save as much. So you do this. Now all of a sudden you have your first child at the same time that you do, but you don't have the ability to live in your own home. Yeah. You're now in a rental apartment. Now you're not able to provide for, your family as much as maybe you wanted to because you didn't rough it when you had the opportunity to, right? And similar to me, I have no kids yet, but my fiance lived in a construction zone for like 2 years straight. Between basically as soon as we got done one construction zone, we hopped into the next construction zone, right? And just kept doing that. I don't think she's going to let me do that anymore. But she also sees how much value we were able to create by, quote unquote, living in an unlivable area. Because we were, we did that. We rented out the upstairs and we moved on. And
I'll bet you probably feel more attachment to the home you live in now and even the previous one because of the work you put into it.
I would think so. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like when you do it yourself, or even if you're, like involved in it yourself, right? Kind of thing.
It has your touch to it. You've like put the effort, you've thought about it, you've cared for it, right? So there's something nice about sort of making a place nicer, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's some, paint the ceiling, you're getting the paint drips in your eye, step in the paint can. You always remember those things, So, but I think that's pretty much wraps it up for today.
All right.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody so much for watching today's video. If you're interested in learning more about real estate investing, or if you're a first-time home buyer and interested in learning about house hacking or how to get into the market, feel free to reach out with a comment or with the information in the description below.